So what this is meant to do is to still reflect upon Chuck, and his legacy, but to talk a little bit about personal reflections as well as where one sees the Department of Biostatistics going based on the legacy of Alan Ross, Chuck, Scott, Karen, and now Liz. So I'd like to introduce first Dr. Karen Bandeen-Rooche. So Karen was the previous chair until July. She is now back to normal faculty, but co-teaching with me. And so I'd like to invite her up to take a seat, and I'll invite Liz up at the same time. So you met Liz already. She is our current chair of the department. Okay, and so I think we'll start first with Karen and asking her regarding some personal reflections on Chuck, because she certainly worked very closely with him, but also what she saw in terms of leadership attributes that maybe haven't been discussed already today.
Oh, well, thanks so much, Rodhe. Just very briefly, I want to say how incredible it is to see everyone. I mean, listening to all of your memories and just seeing you together over all these years, it just means so much. So thank you. Thank you so much for coming. My personal memories are more impressions than anecdotes. The three that really come to mind, you've heard about. I mean, first of all is Chuck's hospitality. Chuck's and Sibylla's hospitality together. They picked me up at the airport, just like they picked up everybody else at the airport. Times at their houses. It was never forced. It was not a hospitality that you sort of show or, that you do for some secondary reason. It was so genuine, it was so easy. Chuck wasn't loquacious, but he found something that resonated between the two of you. For us, it was poodles. He had these big, standard, beautiful, black standard poodles. I grew up, my mom was an amateur poodle breeder, and so we knew sort of the same crowd, and that was a great connection between us. Banter, just like everybody. For him and me, it was sports. This way, sorry. So, for some reason, the North Carolina Tar Heels was his team. It wasn't NC State, it was the Tar Heels. And I love the Maryland Terrapins in terms of college basketball, so he'd always be pasting some Tar Heel blue on my door. And finally, 2002, the Terps won, so I got to paste his whole door with Maryland Terrapin paper, so that was wonderful. And, just this easy thoughtfulness about him. So it's just a little note at an appropriate time to pick you up, or a bottle of champagne or wine, just show up in the office. And the very last one of these was probably early 2022 after Bill's mom and my mom passed away in close succession, sort of a little interval, and suddenly this bottle just shows up with this note. It just lets me know I'm thinking of you. And, so those are the sorts of things I really remember personally. And so there is an anecdote that I think, for me, illustrates his leadership, and it was when I came to interview. So first interview was at another unnamed institution. The chair and his wife did both show up, but before I was hardly, out of the gangway or whatever, he was telling me, now your job is to impress us. And he must have said that a dozen times. And I sort of remember his wife sort of like, yes, your job is to impress. So you can imagine that was not the best interview ever. And so next one, I was told, you can choose to be a big fish in a small pond, or you can come to our place and be a little fish in a big pond. So I was like, okay. And so then I came to Hopkins, and from the moment coming off the plane, it was just like Ron described. I just felt so welcome, so warm, like everything was going to be okay, the sense of possibility, this conveyance of community, and it was all borne out. I went to breakfast the next day with Scott and Mei Chang and some other people at the old Women's Industrial Exchange. And everything that Chuck had said was borne out there. It wasn't just talk. You could tell these people really loved each other, and they were thrilled about the stuff that they were doing in science. And so, the first thing I think I would say about Chuck's leadership was that he really believed in assembling the best people and just empowering them to do what they're passionate about. and what they do best. The second is the importance of community and work life. I think it was Karen Thomas who said that it was like a straight line from Chuck to the present day. I'm absolutely persuaded that all these positive things about our culture go straight back to Chuck. So I really, really feel privileged about that. The third, he fought tooth and nail for the faculty from everything I've learned, stories from chairs who were more senior than me. He fought tooth and nail for the faculty and for the students and for the staff and for the whole community. So I think that's really important to put the department first. We've heard this before too. He had strong beliefs, but also an open mind. And I think that really is amazing leadership, to be able to put both of those things together. And then finally, just always feeling supported, making everybody feel really supported. The last thing I'll say is I never would have been chair without Chuck. I remember this conversation after Mike had asked me to serve as the interim chair. I didn't want to do it. That was never my ambition. And, Chuck somehow made me see that, you should give it a try. There's sometimes a confluence of, time and place and person. And, so I really have to thank him for that and for everything he did here.
Okay, so I will engage the two of you, and either one of you could start on circling back to, this is called lighting the path forward. And so if we come back now to, how do you envision the department going forward? And what is the path you see, built on everything we've heard about today?
Yeah, I can take that one first. It's something I've been thinking a lot about in the past 7 months. And I think especially right now, a lot of this is resonating as we are looking to hire new faculty and sort of thinking about these themes. I'm really reflecting on these pieces really resonate with me in terms of finding the great people and then identifying for each of them what is going to make them shine. And I've been struck throughout the day listening to different paths that different people took. And that Chuck could sort of see what was going to be kind of the right path for each person. And what is also kind of in my head is figuring out how to then set up the structures underneath that to allow that to happen. There are administrative structures, there are budget considerations, there's the stuff behind the scenes that he somehow, made happen in a way that then allows faculty to thrive. So I've told some of you the story already. This summer I met one-on-one with most of the faculty, and I was ready to sort of hear all sorts of, issues and, we need to fix this and we need to fix that, and certainly there was some of that. But I was really struck by the number of people who came in and sat down and said, this department has supported me for so long, how can I support you and it moving forward? And my main takeaway from those meetings was, this is the most important thing to kind of keep, is that spirit of support, mutual support, and collegiality. And you can make so much happen if you have that sort of environment. And so that's sort of, I kind of wish I could go back and ask Chuck more kind of how he sort of did that. Because he did a masterful job, and then Scott and Karen carried that through, so that's sort of one of the main themes. I guess I'll reflect on two other pieces while I have the mic. One is a little bit more serious, which is also really, not that serious, but sort of on the statistical side. I think we as statisticians are, trying to figure out what is our role, and Chuck, I think, so embodied this mix of strong statistical foundations and theory and application, and really straddling those. And I think as we look to what we all do, it's just a model for being able to do both. And I think it's harder these days. I was rewatching this 100th anniversary video, and in it he claims, and I believe, that he had taught every of the sort of core courses in the department, except maybe survival analysis. And I was just sort of reflecting on, as we think about, in fact, I'm not sure I could teach every class in the department. but hopefully we can find people in an environment that sort of at least allows that sort of breadth. It's sort of balancing the breadth and the depth. So just really impressive how he was able to do that. And then I'll just, one final kind of, I'm reflecting on our faculty candidate visits. I have not been picking people up at the airport. I hope that I won't do more changes. But I think we've been having some nice visits, and I want to give credit to Martin Lindquist, who I don't think is here, because he, in the fall when we were talking about things, he's like, Liz, I think we should have people over to like my house for dinner instead of going to a restaurant. Like, you know, I live in DC, so I have this kind of complication that it's hard for me to host. But Martin, sort of as chair of the search committee, took it upon himself to suggest this, and I'm just, that's sort of a nice, very concrete example of this through line of, you know, might evolve over time, and it's no longer the chair and their spouse picking people up at the, well, as she would say, the male chair and wife picking up at the airport. But, you know, it's sort of a new version of that where we can still sort of invite people into the community in a very close way and sort of show that we do like spending time together. And that really is what motivates me in terms of kind of trying to just continue to build that community and find people who are really going to thrive here. So those are some of the kind of reflections I've had throughout the day.
Thank you.
Well, I'm just really excited listening, you know, both to your vision and as thinking forward. You know, two things. You know, one is just this idea of Chuck's that really people, passion, you know, the important mission that we have here at the school and the important environment that we have here at Hopkins provides such a powerful, you know, mix and template that, you know, we can continue to support, to attract great people and to turn them loose. You know, then adding the community that we have on top of that really fosters creativity in a very special way. And so, you know, it's not to say that we shouldn't be strategic. Of course we should, you know, but I was struck by the speaker earlier in the day who pointed out that the problems are going to continue to change, you know, and so it's absolutely position ourselves, but having those great people who can pivot to those problems, you know, I look forward to that continuing in this department.
Great. Well, thank you, both of you. Why don't we see if there are any questions that were piqued by this conversation? Okay. Well, please. Oh, go ahead, Karen.
Hi. Thank you so much for this really interesting discussion. I was just wondering, something I haven't heard much about is the advent of computers and Chuck's role in, you know, helping to bring the department and the school into the like modern computer age. And then now, of course, we are dealing with the challenges and the promise of AI. And I just wonder if either of you have any comments on technology as both, you know, promise, but also in some ways kind of scary. Thank you.
I think of our department as the original data science, right? Going all the way back to 1918 or what have you. And I think throughout that history, we've had to have had the joy of pivoting as new technologies come around. Others can probably speak better than me to this. When I came, it was the big mainframe.
Right,
You know,
so a number of us were with the big mainframe, but we were also with the huge calculators that were changed to desks on the third floor. And so it really pivoted from the 70s to those calculators to doing the mainframe, but that was with punch cards. And if you had one punch wrong, you know, you wouldn't find that out till the next morning. So it was only once a day that you could run your programs. And then it seemed to pivot. Scott, you should comment on, you know, then it pivoted.
I remember I can't remember the young gentleman's name. He worked in the computer department, but
Larry.
No, it was
Marshall?
No, it was before them. It was a guy, I think, in biophysics or something, and we went and got a PDP 1140 that was being thrown away at Princeton, and we brought it down in a rental truck and we set it up in the lab, and we actually had our first little mini cluster. And people used Unix, and they did, you know, sort of more modern things for a while, and then at some point we actually got a grant from NIH, I think, an instrumentation grant, and we're able to start the cluster. And then I have to give credit to the financing model that the MMI, our colleague, Fernando built a financing model where you could donate equipment or pay from grants, and it really then grew with the demands. And it is another moment of transition in terms of technology, because the university is about to invest huge amounts of money into hardware, and how that's going to happen is unclear. But I think we'll, as Karen and Liz just said, we'll pivot as the things become clear. We'll pivot in the direction. We certainly need to be at the cutting edge of technology. It's part of the environment that will attract the talent the way Chuck attracted talent back when.
And I've just got a quick dive in. I want to give Scott props, because when I think about the department of computing, I really think about Scott, whose vision early on, he foresaw big data coming, and he thought to put our first Unix machines in place, and that grew into the cluster, and has always been forward looking in that way.
So being here as a student, I didn't really appreciate Chuck's role in getting sort of more kind of a hard money basis and so forth for biostat, as opposed to the reliance of soft money. That is the model every place. As somebody's clawed for every 5% of my salary for myself and everybody else, that's how it is in a lot of places. So my question going forward is, how do you balance those things? And that's really for Ellen as well, because there's a mix, obviously. I mean, the finances and the resources are an issue. And balancing sort of the expectations. I mean, we're a collaborative science, so we actually had our P&T documents rewritten so that you didn't have to be a PI of a grant, but you do have to be instrumental in it. But nonetheless, that element of an expectation, if you will, of a certain percentage being extramurally funded and less reliance on institutional funds is, I think, ubiquitous. And I'm just kind of interested in your perspectives on moving forward.
It's a great question, and right, and this is sort of what was sort of in my head when I said he was clearly so good at setting things up to make sure that it could be an environment that supported the kind of work that we do. And so, I mean, I think my lens from other places, one thing that does help us in the school is just the decentralized nature, and that sort of there isn't that sort of across the whole school, everyone has to look like this. There's, I've always been sort of impressed within the school, like when I was on the Appointments and Promotions Committee, that people's portfolios look very different from one another, and that's good and fine, and I think the school has sort of supported that. So again, it helps facilitate that environment where you can try to find the parts that are going to make each person shine, and kind of adapt that way. So we have some faculty in the department that do much more teaching than others, and we have some faculty that do more research. And I've been sort of telling people, as long as it kind of averages out, things work out. But sort of for any individual, we can try to make sure that we're finding the right roles for them. But it's something that we have to stay thoughtful and careful about. I think especially when we talk about this a lot at school meetings. Grant budgets sort of feel like they're getting tighter and tighter, and so grants that used to be able to put someone on for 20% are now at 10 or 15, and if you do that 5 times, that makes a big difference in the day-to-day. So how do we sort of make sure that we can build in enough space for thinking, and that's what I think a lot of faculty struggle with, is sort of the pace just feels faster. It feels like people have to be on more things. So I think we, as an institution and a field, need to figure out how do we find that space for people to do the deep thinking and the creativity that we really want to have happen.
On a similar note of the deep thinking, Chuck had an amazing amount of breadth in his knowledge, but that is not a recommendation for any dean faculty. That is a terrible recommendation across the board almost, because almost everybody is becoming, in my opinion, a lot more specialized than in the years Chuck has started out. So do you think we'll be able to ever breed another statistician of the same type of breadth like Chuck? And if so, how?
I hope so. I mean, I think, you know, 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 I think, you because successful organizations really benefit from different types of scientific thinking and roles. You know, there's a great literature out there, there's research to sustain this, you know, and so I think it does enrich an organization, have somebody like Chuck. Now, of course, the challenge, as you know, is how do you fund such a person? How do you support them in a school like ours? But if we can even go part of the way towards figuring out how to do that, I do think it will continue to benefit, you know, our organization.
And one question that was, I've been reflecting on that during the day too, and this is just a question for all of us maybe consider during the break. I actually was wondering, I think our field is bigger now too though, so I'm not sure it's feasible for someone to really cross the whole spectrum, you know, genetics to causal to spatial to everything. But I think we can sort of try for making sure that we encourage some of that breadth. And you know, it's something like when, one of the things I actually like about our school, like sometimes there are structural things that you can kind of do to help encourage that. When I talk to PhD students, I often really point out that here, students have to have faculty from 3 departments on their dissertation committees. And I think that's like one small thing, but it forces some of this ability to talk to other fields. And so that's not within biostatistics, but the more we can think about like what are these ways that we can just help keep pushing those connections, I think the better off we'll be, even if we can't get all the way, you know, to someone who kind of has the whole breadth, but at least trying to move towards that.
Well, what a wonderful way to conclude this conversation. So thank you very much.